Hey everyone, it's QuickyBaby and welcome back to World of Tanks. And it's Friday, I've got a treat for you. It's a brand new British vehicle. It's the A46. This is a tier 6 British light tank that is currently being super tested. This is a pretty good thing to have on a Friday, right? An absolute potato of a British gentleman talking about an upcoming British tank. And you know me, I love my British vehicles, so I'm going to let you know everything that we know so far about the A46. But remember, it's currently being super tested. Everything is subject to change, not just the looks, but also the statistics of this vehicle. So what does this thing kind of remind me of? Well, it kind of looks a bit like a tubby chaffy kind of thing. There's actually some kind of historical relevancy to this vehicle, as they did make, I believe, a full mock-up of the tank, but it never became a reality, and it was a post-World War II design. And of course, I've got to give a big thank you to Ed Francis for his wealth of information. He likes his British vehicles. It's always nice to hear him talk about them, especially so passionately, like me, right? So my initial impressions about the aesthetics of this vehicle is it kind of looks like a T-71-esque hull, but with a better kind of turret. Of course, if the vehicle has any armor, and unfortunately, with the statistics that Wargaming have provided, it doesn't really have any. But you know what? This is a very while it's very pretty, it's not very informative. And in true QuickyBaby fashion, I've taken all of Wargaming statistics from their infogram and I've put them onto an Excel spreadsheet so we can truly see how this tank stacks up compared to their tier 6 British premium medium tank, the Cromwell Berlin, and also the other tier 6 premium light tank in the game. It's bizarre that there's only one other one, the Type 64. But just before we get stuck into the statistics, I'd like to highlight that this vehicle has a 4-person light tank crew, with a commander, a gunner, a driver, and a loader. So if for some reason, like me, you're a bit of a masochist and you love your British light tanks, you'll be disappointed that the Manticore, of course, only has 2 crew members. It's not going to be enough to be able to set this thing up. And really, unless you absolutely, for some reason, love the Covenanter inside the game, and I'll be very surprised if anyone out there had this as their favorite vehicle in World of Tanks, you're not going to really have a very good crew for this tank. And that will be quite upsetting if you want to have brothers in arms right from the get-go, as you're probably not going to have it on the loader, because of course, there isn't even a loader on the Senlac. But of course, firstly, we're going to have to look at the statistics of this vehicle to see whether it's going to be worth it to get all of that tier 6 British goodness. So remember, this is the super test. Everything is subject to change, although really the statistics of the vehicles have been kind of going in with very minor changes recently. So what we see here, it's definitely giving us a very good idea of what the final statistics might still be. So firepower, 77mm, better than the Cromwell Berlin and also the Type 64, looking good so far. Right up until you see the alpha damage of this vehicle. 105, way worse than the Cromwell Berlin and worse than the Type 64. And its penetration, 105 on its standard rounds at tier 6. Yeah, that's really not going to work too well. Even the Type 64 has very poor penetration for a tier 6 tank and needs to load a lot of gold to be able to have 177mm of penetration. And even if you load gold on the A46, 138, what are you going to do to the front of a tier 8 tank with that? Not a lot, boys and girls. Incredibly disappointing penetration characteristics right from the get-go. Okay, so maybe the tank has a wild rate of fire, and wow, it's 18.18, which is strangely exactly the same as the Type 64. Bit of a bizarre thing, that, almost as if Wargaming were kind of thinking, well, we'll just give it the same kind of rate of fire that the Type 64 has. Exactly the same rate of fire. But unfortunately, because the vehicle has a lower damage per shot than the Type 64, its damage per minute is down to 1,900. Wow, that's by no means awful, considering the Manticore at tier 10 has a worse damage per minute than that. It's still not exactly wonderful considering just how small your hits are going to be. Yeah, you're going to have to shoot that IS-3 15 times, most likely into the back of the tank to be able to take it down. Good luck, Chuck. Alright, so maybe this tank has incredible gun handling. Well, yes and no. Its accuracy is awful. 0.45, you're not going to be sniping at anything, which is incredibly frustrating considering just how low the penetration is. Low penetration and low accuracy leads to incredible frustration inside World of Tanks. The aim time, however, is really nice, 1.9 seconds, and of course, we don't know what the gun handling statistics are. So maybe this vehicle is going to have absolutely incredible gun handling and dispersion values when you're driving the tank to even make that 1.9 seconds aim time better. So the depression angle of this tank is neither here nor there, 9 degrees right in the middle of the Cromwell Berlin and also the Type 64. And the vehicle's turret traverse is way better than the Type 64 and comparable to the Cromwell Berlin. Alright, so now onto the mobility of the tank. 350 horsepower engine, means that this vehicle has less power to weight than the medium tank at its tier, but better than the Type 64. It's limited to 60 kilometers an hour forwards, which is, again, not awful, but it's lower than the Cromwell Berlin and way worse than the Type 64, and 20 backwards. The same as the Cromwell Berlin and worse than the Type 64. I think we're seeing a little bit of a pattern here, boys and girls. But maybe it's going to be the armor. Well, no, it's really not going to be the armor, unfortunately. This thing has 31 on the front, 20 at the side, 15 at the rear of the hull, and 35 on the front of the turret, 20 on the side and 20 at the rear. Meaning that apart from your frontal armor, you're going to be overmatched by 61mm caliber guns. Ew. And your hull armor is going to be overmatched by 100mm caliber guns. Yeah, it's not looking pretty for this tank, considering there's quite a few tier 7 tanks and pretty much all tier 8 tanks that have 100mm caliber guns. Hit points rise 580. You're going to get 2 shot by derp guns and 1 shot by some of the tank destroyers that you meet. And its view range is 370. It's not awful. It's not great either, considering the Type 64 has 20 extra meters view range and the Cromwell only has 10 meters less. And so all in all, what is there really to say about the A44? It looks like it's just way worse than the Cromwell Berlin in pretty much every regard, apart from view range and a little bit of gun handling, and that is it. The Type 64 pretty much clubs it for 6 in most areas, especially the ones that really matter, like view range and being able to, drive quickly inside a light tank, as well as also having by far the way better performing gun. And all of you Type 64 drivers out there who were thinking, finally, another tier 6 premium light tank that I can get my hands into. Well, just remember how much you struggle with the standard rounds, let alone the premium rounds on the Type 64. And imagine what you're going to do with 105mm of penetration and 138mm of gold penetration. Yeah, the A46 is looking like an absolute stinker right now, boys and girls. But I was kind of wrong when it comes to the Manticore. Sure, the tank isn't the best tier 10 light tank, but it still can be quite fun because of the low profile size of the tank. However, I can tell you that this tank is not even that short. It's 2 meters tall, whereas the Manticore is 1.67 meters tall. And I'm sorry for all of you Americans out there. I guess that's the difference between 5'9" or 5'8" and about 6'3" or something. And so what I'm trying to say is that I was hoping that maybe the A46 would have incredible camera rating like the Manticore. It's not likely to happen. I expect that this vehicle will cap out with a maxed out crew, probably about 36 or maybe 38 on the move with that kind of a height value. Wargaming could stretch this as far as the early 40%ers, but I really don't see this thing getting up to like 45 or even 47 like you can in the Manticore or the EBR, which would have kind of made up for it if it was just incredible at being a scout. Especially maybe you could use binoculars on the tank and then you could just get into a bush and be really sneaky at low tier if that's your kind of thing. I just really don't think it's going to work out. And what we really do have here is a vehicle that is definitely significantly shorter than the Cromwell, probably by about 50 centimeters. It's like 35 centimeters taller than the Manticore. And so it's right in between those two vehicles. It's not going to be the sneaky tank that it would need to be to make up for all of these horrific firepower statistics. And pretty darn mediocre armor and not even the best view range or even the top speed to go with the tank. It looks like absolutely nothing. So how would I personally fix this? There are so many different ways that Wargaming could fix the statistics of the A46 to make it decent while just not giving it really good camera rating, for example, by making it shorter and squishing the tank model. They could, for example, increase the alpha damage. They could increase the penetration, probably a mixture of those two. Obviously, they want to make it different to the Type 64. They just don't want to make another Type 64 at Tier 6. I really think that one of the special things they could do with this vehicle is either give it some kind of derpy gun, or maybe they could just give it the gun depression that apparently the tank was meant to have, which was 12 degrees. Why has it only got 9 degrees of gun depression when the research is pointing towards 12? That would kind of make it almost just a cut down comet in the form of a light tank. That could allow you the flexibility to be able to work your ridgeline and to hide the awful armor that this vehicle has and still be relevant. If Wargaming aren't willing to do this, I would recommend to increase the top speed limit of the tank or increase the view range to a point where it actually has a purpose. Because right now, as it stands, I really don't see the point of the A46. I think it's going to be an absolute stinker inside World of Tanks. And in my opinion, a missed opportunity for a tank that definitely looks rather cool, right? Come on, it's a good-looking tank. I guess. Maybe a tank that only a mother could love. I don't know. It's up to you. Let me know in the comments what you think about it. Do you think it looks aesthetically pleasing? And what do you think about the statistics that Wargaming have given him? I think really the final nail of the coffin of this A46 is the idea that if you want to play this vehicle well, you're going to have to just find a British light tank loader to put in the vehicle. You can't even use your Manticore crew. You're going to be training up probably some extra crew that you have in your Senlac or even in the tier 7, 8 or 9 British light tank, which actually has a gunner, unlike the Manticore. Yeah, this one's a bit of a mess, boys and girls, but I definitely think it's savable if Wargaming address the areas of the tank that I recommended. And so, I don't know, I'm sorry to do it to you, all of you British light tank lovers out there. I was really hoping that we were going to have better news on this Friday. Nevertheless, I hope you enjoyed this one and let me know what you would change about the A46 to maybe make it look a little bit more competitive compared to the other two meta tier 6 premium tanks at its tier. And as it's Friday the 13th, stay safe. Things might get a little bit spooky, right? As always, thank you so much for watching. You've been epic and hopefully I'll see you soon.